Let's call to order the Board of Franklin County Commissioners meeting for Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Stottlemyre.
Present.
Commissioner Howard.
Present.
Chair Waymeyer.
Present.
Vice Chair Dickinson.
Present.
Commissioner Dunn.
Present.
If you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. And today the invocation will be led by our sheriff. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pray, Almighty God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here, and we thank you for living in a country where we still have the opportunity to do that and to call on you publicly. I just thank you for the men and women that choose to serve this community, and I pray that you bless them with wisdom and discernment and courage as they go about their duties. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Do we have correspondence or organizational business today? No. Public comment. Here's the policy regarding public comment. A citizen desiring to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so at this time. Discussion is limited to 5 minutes, and the commission will not take action or discuss items at this time. Discussion should be limited to matters of county commission business, and public comment is not permitted in regards to personnel matters or on pending legal matters. Items introduced under public comment may become agenda items at a later date.
Brian Webster.
Good morning, Brian Webster, 1108 Osborne Road. Purpose for my visit today is to convey appreciation to our Director of Public Works for our meeting on June 19th. Thank you, David. I would like to leave you with a kind thought. Fiduciary relationship. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Any others? All right. Our consent agenda today would be to consider approving the minutes from our meeting on July 1st. Do we have any claim vouchers or tax change orders?
No.
I didn't see any. All righty, so that's our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve it?
Motion approved, consent agenda.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Stottlemyre.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson. Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Chair Waymeyer.
Yes. Our first item of business is consider a rezoning application. Larry will fill us in on the details.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As you've indicated, this first item is a consideration of a rezoning for the Planks. This is to rezone 5 acres from the A2, which is the transitional agricultural zone, to the RE residential estate zone. The purpose for this rezoning is to grant that 5 acres to a relative for the construction of a new residence. The Planning Commission considered that last month and have forwarded a recommendation to you to amend our zoning regulations accordingly. And we do support the recommendation of the Planning Commission and recommend that you accept that recommendation and direct staff to amend our official zoning map, changing that zoning from the A2 to the RE for the 5 acres that are shown on the surveys attached as part of your staff report. I have nothing further to add unless any of you have questions.
Questions for Larry on this one?
Seems pretty straightforward, and we do a lot of these, so I'll make the motion to approve the application.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Commissioner Stottlemyre.
Yes.
Chair Waymeyer.
Yes. All right, our second item of business is a special use permit.
This is a request for a special use permit, Mr. Chairman, that involves a private landing strip in an A1 agricultural zoning district. This landing strip is located in the vicinity of Richmond, east of Richmond, and very close to one that was previously approved a few years ago for another applicant. This matter did take a considerable amount of time for the Planning Commission. There was a lot of discussion on the requirements of the FAA regarding private landing strips and what is required and what are just recommendations from the FAA. So the conditions that were initially suggested by staff were modified during that hearing process. Those amendments have now been included in the draft resolution from the Planning Commission, who has recommended approval based on the findings and subject to the conditions that were set forth then in that draft resolution. We did have one individual, Mr. Stottlemyre, and not this Don Stottlemyre, but Don D. Stottlemyre, opposed to this until he found out that it really wasn't going to be a lighted facility. It's used solely in the daytime. It's basically totally a non-commercial. It's a private landing strip that'll be used primarily by family members, although from time to time you might have other landings from other pilots that are flying in the Franklin County area that need to come down for refueling or other purposes. Again, the Planning Commission has forwarded to you a recommendation then for the approval of this special use permit for the landing strip based on the conditions that are set forth, and I think there are 5 of them, in the staff report and in the draft resolution that's attached as a part of this report. I have nothing further to add unless any of you have questions.
My only question, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but being this is a private landing strip, Derek, there could be no chance that the county could have any kind of liability on this if anything was to.
No, practically no, none.
Is this currently crop acreage?
It can be used for that purpose where you have pilots that are doing crop spraying, and that might have to come down to add fuel, but you have to get permission through the private, it's a private landing strip, so you have to get permission from the owner of that in order to land, I guess, except in emergency. Any pilot up there, if he saw this and had an emergency, are going to land on it regardless. They land on our highways and freeways, so I'm sure that they would take advantage of this too if they had to.
The 25 feet from the sideline, that's, you consider that also,
The,
that far enough away?
well, it's much further than that. The landing strip itself is about 60 foot wide, but the actual right-of-way for that grass strip is about 60 feet. The runway itself is only about 25.
Larry, is this basically for experimental aircraft? I kind of read that these people were making experimental.
He has made his own aircraft, but all of these are totally approved through the FAA, so they're not just truly experimental. Most of these are the little Cessnas, they're single engine, and he has built an aircraft or two, but what he flies and his family is learning to fly are basically the little Cessna single engines.
I think we got some of maybe the people who are involved in here. Are they here today?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
How many private landing strips do you think there are in the county?
Probably about 13 or 14. For the Planning Commission, I didn't have an exact count because these things kind of come and go, and we've had 3 or 4 that have been pulled off of the FAA list. So that list is probably not totally up to date either.
All right, well, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the special use permit for the operation of a private landing strip in an A1 agriculture zoning district based on the findings and subject to the 4 conditions cited in the attached resolution.
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Dickinson?
Yes?
Commissioner Dunn?
Yes.
Commissioner Stottlemyre?
Abstain.
Commissioner Howard? Chair Waymeyer?
Yes. All right, thanks, Larry. Our third item of business, consider awarding tire bids, awarding tire bids to Pomp's Tire Service. Yep.
This is pretty standard fare. We need to replenish our stock of tires for our best form to fix. This time was a little unusual in that we only got one back. Reaching out to the other vendors to participate next time around. We'll be doing this again maybe later in the fall or early next year. So. Client of ours, or vendor, I should say, and we recommend.
Where are they from?
They are from Topeka.
Is this somebody that's changed? I don't remember that name before, that's why.
No, they've, since I've been in this position, every time we've had a tire bid, they have always participated.
Oh, just had never got it before.
No, I think they have. I think that
Okay.
the last time, they and another vendor.
Is it something odd on the tires that maybe all of them handle it, or no, not many of them handle it, or?
These were, again, the same size of tires that we routinely get.
Okay.
So even though they're the only bid, are they, do you feel like the prices are,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Pops didn't know that nobody else. Prices that we've received on the past bids have all been relatively close to each other. There's not perhaps disparities between the prices. So,
Are these heavy equipment tires, or?
some of them are.
Okay.
Is there a motion to award the tire bid number 1, 2, and 3 to Pomp's Tire Service?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Dunn?
Yes.
Commissioner Stottlemyre?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson?
Yes?
Chair Waymeyer?
Yes. Our fourth item of business, consider for approval Franklin County Coronavirus Relief Fund Resolution.
Yeah, we've talked about these CARES Act funds for several weeks. The county has been allocated roughly $5.2 million from the state of Kansas. These funds flow from federal legislation known as the CARES Act. Because the state is currently in possession of those funds, they're asking that we execute this resolution that binds us to certain timelines. The timelines are set out in the resolution. They are aggressive, but the deadlines imposed in the federal legislation are aggressive as well. And so if you have any questions specifically about the resolution, certainly can answer those. I will intend to give an update during staff reports on where we're at in this entire process in terms of working with the cities and school districts. But you can see the timelines in there. The most pertinent one currently is August 15th. That is when the first reconciliation is due. So all of the expenses that we have incurred and others have incurred between March and the end of July will be due to the state on August 15th. We are very much on top of that, particularly at the county level. I think we could be ready to go today. And then our direct aid spending plan, which I'll talk about here in a bit, is also due on the 15th. And so This is necessary to receive those funds, so passing this is a no-brainer. It's something that every single county in the state of Kansas, they have to pass this exact resolution, so.
All right. Any questions or comments on this?
Is this, Derek, is this strictly for government entities, this one, or?
Yes, this is for, so the counties are actually receiving these funds, and we have been instructed to share them with municipalities within the county and school districts within the county. There have been questions, and we're still awaiting answers on, like, district courts. It's my belief that this is not for them, but we are awaiting that answer, and so. But we know municipalities and school districts are eligible, and we are working with them.
What's the resolution number?
2014.
Would you like to make a motion to approve the resolution that's presented?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Commissioner Stottlemyre?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn?
Yes.
Chair Waymeyer?
Yes. Our fifth item is related to this. Go ahead, Derek.
So, as you can imagine, if you've ever even dipped your toe in any kind of grant work or worked with federal or state legislation, there's a plethora of guidelines that you have to follow, of restrictions that are in place. For that reason, the state is recommending, I think, smartly, that local governments utilize consultants to help work through this process. This is something that most of the counties that I have been in contact with are doing. Before you is a proposal from a consulting firm. This is a firm that several other counties have used and have highly recommended. The benefit of this is what this company does. They know the ins and outs of the legislation. They know the nuances as they apply to Kansas because they've done extensive work in Kansas. The proposal caps the fees at $75,000. Doesn't mean it's going to cost that. That's just the cap. To be very clear, every dime of that would come out of the CARES Act funds. So not a dollar of Franklin County tax dollars would be used to pay this consultant. And the benefit is they are probably going to help us make use of far more of those funds than we could alone, because we don't have that expertise. And I've said this all along, but we still have a county government to run. Before COVID-19, I had a full-time job. Like, this was a full-time job for me. Janet had a full-time job, and now we have a pandemic on top of it. She has got what is going to be a massive election in the fall. We are still working on the budget. Like, my staff and I, Janet, we don't have time to dig into this, to learn the nuances in a way that's going to do the organization and the people of Franklin County justice. By hiring a consultant, they'll help us. They'll help us with ideas on how we can distribute this money, on how we can wisely spread it out and make each dollar go as far as it possibly can. And so I don't have the actual agreement with Witt O'Brien's in front of you. It's right here, but it still needs a fair amount of work. So what I was asking for is permission to work with them on a contract that would be up to $75,000. The reason I didn't want to wait another week is because the deadlines are so aggressive. I would like to get them involved here as soon as possible. And I do think more and more counties are going to be utilizing not only this firm, but others. So there's something to be said for getting towards the front of that line. So any questions about this, we'll be happy to answer.
And not only are they going to help us get every dime that we can, they're also going to make sure that we don't make a mistake and pay for something that we shouldn't pay for.
I think that's the biggest thing, Ian, is there's going to be a lot of auditing requirements and stuff, and we will be responsible for auditing all of the funds, not just the funds that we use, but the funds that we allow the school districts and the cities to use. And so having the right documents and being prepared to provide those and stuff, that this firm will help us with all of that. So that's going to be really important, so that none of that falls back on us.
Because this does pass through us, we'd ultimately be liable if it
Right.
went out to another entity for them to help, and
Yep.
hate to accept help, or what's been called help, just to find out it's later a detriment, so this would protect us from that.
Absolutely.
So we don't have the document, but we have the terms that we're agreeing to and to go forward with it. So do you want to outline that maybe for a motion that would?
Yeah, I mean, the proposal sets out the pertinent terms. I would say that if the board were inclined to vote in favor of this, an affirmative motion would read that I make a motion to accept the proposal for cost recovery and emergency management advisory services from Witt O'Brien's.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to that effect?
I would make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson?
Yes?
Commissioner Dunn?
Yes.
Commissioner Stottlemyre?
Yes.
Chair Waymeyer?
Yes. All right. Our sixth item is to consider executing a resolution which would extend the disaster declaration executed on May 15th for an indefinite period. Alan Ratcliffe is here to elaborate on this item.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As you know, we've been in a disaster declaration since March 14th. We've extended it a couple times. The last time was May 15th, and then we did a 60-day extension at that time. This is going to be a long-term incident, possibly through the end of the year, and working with the state, I'm recommending that we do this resolution that would allow us to continue indefinitely until rescinded, because we don't know an end date on this pandemic.
Makes sense. Is there any questions? All right.
Alan, has this ever, has this ever gone away, this resolution, or are we still in it right now?
We're still in a resolution that we extended on May 15th, and we extended it in May 15th, and it expires next week. So when doing that, we've been doing them every 60 days, and by doing this resolution, then we don't have to come back in 60 days and do another one.
In retrospect, I'm not going to say we should have done an indefinite one last time, because it's not much of a burden on Alan and I to be back in front of you 60 days later. But at this point, I don't think there's anyone that believes that the pandemic's going to be over in another 60 days. I don't think anyone believes it's going to be over in another 120 days. And so it's just more efficient to do this indefinitely. As you know, a disaster declaration, when I first started, that seemed provocative to me, like, oh, we're declaring a disaster, but it's really just a procedural formality that we do for FEMA funding and reimbursements. It's really just a procedural hurdle that we need to do here at the county.
The requirement so that we can continue to get resources from the state and federal government to give folks in the county the help that we've been doing a good job. They've come to expect the things we're doing, and so we can continue that.
That's exactly right.
All right, pretty straightforward. Any more questions before we make a motion? Motion to approve executing this resolution, which would extend the disaster declaration that was executed on May 15th for an indefinite period.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Commissioner Dickinson?
Yes?
Commissioner Dunn?
Yes.
Commissioner Stottlemyre?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard? Chair Waymeyer?
Yes. Let's go to staff reports. Derek?
All right, so I'll just touch back on those CARES Act funds. So throughout this pandemic, we have had department heads and elected officials sending any and all COVID-related expenses to Janet. So we are very much on top of that. We will continue to send those receipts to her through the end of this month, and then we will be ready at our level for that first reconciliation and fully expect to get every dime of that money back. That will include any and all costs that we've spent on PPE. There have been certain technology costs that we've incurred to allow employees to work remotely. Overtime costs for staff are going to be included. And then there are other costs that we're still awaiting guidance on, but I'm starting to think more and more that salary and benefit costs for any and all personnel who have been substantially dedicated to COVID response, we hope, are going to be reimbursable. Now, the question is whether or not, if it was already budgeted, will those costs indeed be reimbursable? The more guidance I read, the more I'm inclined to believe that they will. And if that's the case, that'll be a good win for us, because substantially dedicated is just considered a majority of your time. And, you know, I can guarantee you that everyone in the health department, majority of their time, Alan Radcliffe, his assistant Tom, my time, Casey's time, Janet's time, Nick Robbins' time. And if you look at over the course of the year, 10 months of all of our salaries, you're potentially looking at several $100,000 that we would be eligible for reimbursement for. So I am very, very cautiously optimistic that that will be considered a reimbursable expense. And so we'll see how that goes. Yesterday, Janet and Casey and I met, and we had a teleconference with the city manager as well as the superintendent of 290 just to discuss the program. Shortly after that meeting, we sent out communication to the city clerks in each of the small cities, to all of the superintendents in the county, just laying out the program, what the deadlines are, and when we would like to see all of their receipts. And so we've asked each of the school districts to gather their receipts, same with the small towns, and we would like to have those by the end of this month. And so they have several weeks to gather that and get that. We've told them for months that they need to be holding on to this documentation, so hopefully they have. But if we have it by the end of the month, that'll give Janet and I at least a couple of weeks to get that gathered. We've also asked them to submit any proactive ideas that they have. So that is what this direct aid spending portion is. Two portions of funding. One is true reimbursement for costs that have already been incurred, and the other is a direct aid spending plan whereby we say, okay, here's what we think our ongoing expenses are going to be. We submit that plan to the state and they say yes or no. If they say yes, then they just send us a check for what it's going to take to cover those costs. That is where we can get a little more creative. The state is really pushing telework and the ability to work remotely. And so working with Dustin on how best to achieve that. And I think there are things that we were gonna need anyway at the county level that we're gonna need to be paid for with county tax dollars that I'm hopeful we can use this funding for. So in addition to meeting the state's objectives, to creating a safer work environment, we're also going to be saving the taxpayers money. That is our goal, and I think we can attain that goal. And so any questions about that, about how we're working it, certainly ready to answer.
Got it all? All right. Casey, anything?
I just have a quick update. Besides COVID, I have been working with David Lee on his road and bridge update, and historically, we've done a PDF file weekly that's posted on our homepage, and now we have a separate website for road and bridge updates, and pictures just kind of scroll through. You can see projects that they've completed and road closures. So that went live yesterday, and we'll keep it updated at least once a week, but hopefully even more often than that. That's my only update.
Deal, thank you. Sheriff?
Just an update on some personnel things. We had 3 people that were waiting to go to KLETC, to the academy, and one from the jail, one from patrol, and one from court security. And I was notified yesterday that all 3 of them will be starting class the end of this month. So they are back up and running. They've expanded, they've increased our class size. As you know, a few months ago, I told you they had revamped some things and they had reduced their sizes of their classes and things, and I think they've walked that back a little bit. So we'll have our people that are waiting for to go to the academy. They'll be starting the end of this month. So that's pretty good news for us. So I don't have really anything else unless you guys have questions for me.
What are your numbers right now?
In the jail,
Uh-huh.
we're back up in the 60s in-house. So we're pretty much back to the pre-COVID situation in our jail. But what it's just because of the pandemic response that we have, those numbers are a little bit more trying and more frustrating for us because we are still working to do all of our, make sure we're doing isolation and all of those things. And it does make it much more difficult when the numbers are growing, but we're still plugging away. So.
Thanks. Nick, you have an update?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a quick rundown of what's happened in the last week. We have received results back from 2,278 tests. There was some differences between everybody that had access to the reporting software in our department. So I was showing about 200 more than somebody else in the department. So we've got those numbers straightened out with the state. So on the numbers that Casey puts out, there will be some fluctuation over the last weekend just because of the amount of tests that KDHE had and some of the stuff that they had going on with the system. With that, total 81 positives, 64 recovered. We got 16 active and 1 death. We did get an LPN hired. She started today thanks to the human resources. I'll tell you, Sari and her crew have been amazing throughout this. I appreciate them a lot. Some interesting numbers, talking to Quest and the OFP lab. Quest in Lenexa is getting 40,000 tests a day, and that's just in this area. So when I talk about results being backed up, Quest, we're 8 to 9 days right now on getting some of our results back if we send them through Quest. They can process about 10,000 a day. They're looking at doing a satellite site somewhere to help with this influx of testing, but one of the things we're running into is getting test results back in a timely fashion. KDHE lab did go to minimum staffing over the weekend. By doing that, we're behind with them probably 4 to 5 days also. One of the things we're seeing is the difficulty in getting negative test results back, or when we get them back, following up with them. A lot of health departments have started mailing those. We're not looking to do that, but one of the things that we're seeing is when you do have an influx of a lot of negatives, instead of calling everyone, mailing them, we're getting the staff on board and working through to continue to call, but those are things that are happening throughout the state. We have seen an increase in symptomatic patients. A lot of the positives that we have had in the last couple weeks have been symptomatic, hospitalized. We've had a total of 3, I believe, hospitalized in the last few weeks. So we are seeing an increase of symptomatic patients. Still talking to nursing homes once a week. They're still slowly opening back up, allowing visits with 6-foot spacing, masks. Working with Alan and his crew on handing out the masks that we receive from the state, making sure the nursing homes and other places understand social distancing. So we've been busy with a lot of that stuff in the health department. I'm not seeing it letting up anytime soon. We continue to do a lot of contact tracing and following up on the positives that we have. Dispatch, we did get our monthly results back from our accreditation. We're in the excellent category again with that, so after getting our accreditation, we're staying where we're at. They're doing a good job. We're full staff there. Our new person has moved to the floor and is starting to work with the training officer down there, so hopefully within a month or so, she'll be on her own. EMS is full staffed, so we're bringing them on and getting them throughout their training, so all the departments are full and we're doing good.
Great.
Any questions for me?
I have one, but I can get it out. Nationally, you're saying that the age is going down. Are you seeing that here in Franklin County? Are you getting more young people?
We're seeing a lot more younger age group with it, but we're very spread out from the 70s all the way down into the 18, 19-year-olds. One of the biggest concerns we're seeing, and we talked about this yesterday on our ESF 8 call, is college students, high school students having COVID parties, trying to get COVID, going and having parties with people that have COVID to try to do it. Honestly, that's one of our biggest concerns with everything coming back. There's no proof that getting COVID is going to keep you from getting it again. So people that are doing that are putting themselves at risk to something that's not proven that they're not going to get it again, or it couldn't be worse. So we're hoping that stays away from Franklin County, but that's one of the biggest concerns we have.
I talked to a lady from Franklin County who had a niece, 19 years old, who died from the COVID. Her entire lungs were filled with blood clots, 19, with no pre-existing condition. So, yeah, it's.
Exactly.
So when I go to Ottawa Walmart, about 50% of the people are not wearing masks. Yesterday, I was in Lawrence at Aldi's and Walmart, and 100% of the people were wearing masks. How do we convince our people that it's important?
Walmart's starting to require it today.
Are they?
Yeah, my
Well,
daughter
thank
works at
the Lord.
Walmart, and she said that they were going to start enforcing it today.
I mean, if they need to, they're the ones that are going to have to do it too. Yeah, good.
And we've, Dr. Rance and myself have talked many times about how masks are slowing the spread of this. What's pretty sad is, you look at some of the stuff that came out, Kansas did a great job stopping the peak or, slowing the curve. And now we're one of the top 14 states on the rise. So we've got a lot of things going the wrong way for us right now.
Well, I know that, if they require masks, people are still going to shop there, because where else are they going to go? But there are also people, and I've talked to several of them, that are not going to Walmart or any place else that's not requiring masks, because they need to shop someplace where there's masks. So they're losing business by not requiring masks.
I think where I've been, a lot of your at least employees at these places are wearing masks. So you're seeing that shift. So I hope we continue to see it. Any other questions for me? Thank you.
Anything you need to add, Alan?
Just want to add real quick to reiterate what Nick was saying, but to also let you know that on the mask, we all know the executive order that the governor put out last week, and with that order, part of the declaration that we've got, you guys have already talked about, which makes me feel good that everybody in this room now knows what a declaration of disaster is for, over the last couple years where we've had so many of them. But one of the things we're really fighting, we received 50,000 masks last week from the state, and because we have this declaration, we can receive those resources from the state when we're having trouble getting them. We pushed out 25,000 masks from Thursday through the weekend to make available to the citizens, and that includes all of the cities received an allotment of masks, and then we had them available over the weekend at EMS, and they're still available if people need the mask. They can get a hold of us, and we've got plenty. We've got some ordered that'll be in this week too, so we have plenty of masks available. As Nick said, Dr. Budd has preached to us for the last couple months about wearing a mask, and I think we're seeing more of it, but I still think that we need to continue to push it. One of the things we're fighting real hard, because this is a long-going incident and pandemic, is people are getting complacent. We even have first responders that we are reminding. We've got a meeting with all of our rural fire departments again this Thursday with EMS on our medical calls. We've modified some policies. We did that back in March, and we're just reiterating the need to follow the policies and procedures and use the proper PPE. So, and with that for our office, we're continuing to support public health, EMS, all of our first responders, and the public as they're needed for whatever they need.
So you're working on a resolution for drought?
Hope we don't need that one, but we have discussed a bingo card for the rest of the year.
Working that way, so.
All right. Let's switch gears. How about economic development? Anything? Paul?
Oh,
All
I'd
right.
like to ask Paul a question.
All right. Come on up, Paul.
I know last week when you brought the candidate that we approved, does the city, do you take them to the city also? Just the
No.
county side?
Just the county side. The city has their own program, so
Okay.
anything within the city limits.
So
has to
they
go-
need to contact
Wendy-
people in the city?
Wendy Lee is the
Okay.
the contact.
I did give your name as just to give them information where to go.
I'm happy to visit any, yeah.
This
I
person
get-
actually does work in the county, in the city, but his business is in the city.
Yeah, I've received several calls from folks in the
Okay.
city, and I'm happy to kind of share with
Okay.
them the detail and then just tell them if they want
I
to
told
make
him
a
you'd
formal
just be
app.
the information part
Yeah.
of it, just to
Yeah,
lead
I'm
it
happy,
in the right direction.
happy to do that.
Are you getting responses?
I'm getting a lot of activity.
Well, that's
What I'm seeing is a number of folks are just above the low to moderate incomes, which disqualifies them, so I'm hoping the next round we can find some resources for that group that's just above it, because we do have some industry or businesses that are just above that need help that I'm not able to help. The big thing right now, reason I don't have any to present to you today, it's a paper push to get all the documentation. And so it is a little bit of work on getting the right documentation, and that still changes from time to time, is what the state will accept or not. So it's still a little bit of a game, but it's settling out, so I'll probably have
You know
several
what
to
number
bring.
that is that they're considering the moderate income?
Pardon me?
You know what number that is?
Depends on the number in the household. If it's one person, it's around 33.9. If it's two people, it's 44 something. If it's three people, it's 50 something.
Now, this is for businesses, right?
This is for the house, it's basically, they have to have 51% of the employees of that business be at the low to moderate income level. So
What if
that's
they're a
their house.
one-man operation?
And it's one household, 33,000. That's where we run into some of that with sole
Okay.
proprietors or just two people. So
Okay.
what I'm doing, visiting with people that just don't quite qualify, because that's the first discussion I have, so I don't make them do all the paperwork unnecessarily. I'm keeping their names and numbers and letting them know as further programs come available, if they're eligible, I'll reach back out to them. And so I'm kind of keeping a file of folks that I can't help today in hopes that we can help them in the future.
Do you want to recap anything we're ready to discuss from our meeting yesterday?
Thank you. FCDC had the executive board meeting yesterday, and we will be bringing forward to Derek a signed MOU from FCDC as we look forward to moving into the renovated facility here. We also will be probably presenting in the next day or two our notice of termination of the rental agreement with the Chamber, which is a 60-day notice that we're required by the agreement. However, we've stated in there, if they find a tenant today, I'll move out so that they don't lose an opportunity to get replacement income. On the flip side, we don't anticipate moving in 60 days, so if they don't have anybody, we'll stay until there's space available. So really what the notice says to them is whatever happens first, they find a tenant or the space is made available for us to move into, that's when we'll move. But we are required to give them a 60-day formal notice, so we agreed to do that yesterday. So we're also working on contracting with a marketing company and a consultant combination to where we'll be more proactively promoting Proximity Park rather than waiting for leads to come from KCADC or the Commerce Department. This will help us go through a process, and you'll be involved in that in some interviews as far as what's our target industry, what are we willing to get, and some of those types of issues. So we'll be working through that. So I'm excited about that opportunity. Just a quick note, since I'm here, is we still continue to get interest in Proximity Park. We did lose 3 leads last month because of COVID. Businesses have put things on delay, or they've just decided to not do anything right now. But on the flip side, we're seeing interest from businesses that are directly related to COVID relief manufacturing. And some of that is trying to move things out of China. Some of it's just feeling like there's an opportunity for us to grab some of the marketplace. Just had a visit with another company yesterday in that field. So while it creates some losses on one end, it's creating some new opportunities on the other.
Paul, you was at a Pomona City Commission meeting Monday, and what do those folks have to say about the programs, the block grant programs?
They're very appreciative that we have this CDBG money that's available. I did leave some applications there. In fact, I got a phone call the next day, and I've already been over to work with another business in Pomona on making an application. So they are appreciative of that. I'm visiting the different commissions and getting some ideas on projects they have, because I think there'll be opportunities to get the CDBG money just like Williamsburg did for streets. I know Pomona just finished a huge sewer project, but as those projects and opportunities come up in those meetings, I'm trying to be aware of that. For example, in Wellsville, they're going to have some water issues, so they're going to be buying water from Edgerton until they can solve that. So I've reached out to the state and to Senator Moran's office for ideas on how we might get some funding for a major improvement in the water system in Wellsville. And I'm also looking at a downtown Main Street development grant for Wellsville, so I can take that to those commissioners and let them think about it. So trying to do those types of things as well.
Great. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks. David?
Okay, Commissioners, despite the short week last week, and we've got a whole bunch of folks on taking some time off right now also, we were able to finish the Texas and Finney Road project. A lot of ditching work, a lot of drainage work, crossroad tubes, rebuilding the road surface, and so that road is open. It's got new gravel on it, looks great. On Monday, we started a similar project on California, on the north and south side of Sand Creek, where we are repairing ditches and taking care of those things as well, field entrances and that sort of thing. Today, we should wrap that up by getting rock put on the road in that area. And then we will move on to Nevada Terrace from Marshall to Kingman. It's about a 2-mile stretch, and there's a number of locations along there that we're going to be working on ditches as well. That seems to be the kind of the work program this year. Any road work that we're going to be doing will be mostly based on repairing ditches, simply because of all the floods. So We're not going to have miles and miles of gravel roads that we rebuild this year. Our focus is going to be trying to repair these spots that we repeatedly have washouts and silted ditches and that sort of thing. So we're trying to make a big dent in that. So that's pretty much what we've been doing the last week. Some things that hopefully will see on your agenda yet this month is we are putting together a report on the solid waste, the C&D landfill to be exact. There may be a few action items that come out of that. And then the pavement analysis should be done soon. In conjunction with that, we will have a asphalt patching and overlay project to go along with it. And then we've got another motor grader that's up on hours that we'll need to be replacing here in the next month or so. So those things will be coming before you before long.
Janet?
If I get a question.
Yep.
I haven't heard anything. I was seeing in the Anderson County where they had a big influx at their solid waste because of the pipeline coming through. I don't know what. It didn't say what. It just said that their numbers were way up because of. I didn't know if we was having any effect for any reason.
I'm not sure that, well, I haven't heard anything associated with the pipeline. Our numbers are up, just like they were last year. But it's not, I can't point the finger at the pipeline project.
They didn't say what. They just said,
When will you have your results from the landfill?
We've got them. That's all part of the report that I'm putting together. I'm hoping to meet with Derek here soon, and then we'll be coming before you all. It's pretty good news, a lot better than I anticipated.
On that issue, the pipeline, I've received some complaints, especially on 15th Street, Marshall Road. Equipment comes in, and then the pipeline people block the road, both directions, and wait till equipment arrives to take the pipe or whatever off these semis as they come in with new equipment or new supplies. Have you had any complaints about that?
I have not. I have witnessed some of that. The trucks and the equipment that they are bringing in are awfully large, and from a safety and traffic control environment, they have to shut it down. But I've been through those areas two or three times in different parts of the county where they've done that, and the wait's never more than 5 or 10 minutes. They try to be, in my experience, again, they have tried to be cognizant of the people that are waiting and trying to get them around as soon as it's safe to do so. But when they're offloading on the road like that, they really have no choice but to stop folks and make them wait. It's an
I
inconvenience.
understand that. But anyway, I've heard some complaints about it.
To be honest, the overall scale of this project, I have only received a handful of complaints about anything that's going on with their project. Now that, maybe they just haven't come to me, but personally, I haven't received hardly any.
Shouldn't they be on the, kind of the end of their time frame?
Well, right now, they're trying to get the line buried, and so they're, working rapidly to get that part of it done. I drove by their yard this weekend and again, early Monday, and, they've got a lot of equipment
A lot of equipment.
there, but they also still have massive amounts of equipment out and about. And where they were lowering the pipe in, they probably had half a dozen or more large track loaders that they were using to set that pipe in the ground. So it's quite an operation.
Janet?
Just want to let you guys know that the electronic poll books that you guys approved for the elections office arrived last week. We have them all unloaded, and our vendor is supposed to be on site today for testing on those to make sure they're as promised. And then this afternoon, we'll do the official testing to load all of our data onto them so we can start voting next week. So we actually will send out all the advance ballots on Wednesday. So we have over 1,000 ballots that are going to be going out on Wednesday, which is a huge amount for us. Normally in a primary election, we will only have about 250 to 300. We have roughly 225 on our permanent advance list, which are people who are disabled and can't get out to go to a polling location. And then we would have a handful of others that we would normally do that had, were away on a business trip or something, or college and needed a ballot. But this time with the mailer and all the extra work surrounding COVID to make sure everyone is safe, my office has been very busy processing those applications. And we know that we have a lot more general election requests. A lot of people did not fill out the primary requests, so that 1,000 that'll be going out are mostly, probably over 3/4 in response to the mailer that we sent out around concerns of COVID. So, and then the following Monday is when we will start our advance voting in the office. So got a lot coming up in the election office. We're really busy and getting everything done. Yesterday, we hosted our first round of meetings for the budget sessions with our townships and cemetery districts and fire districts. So I would say we probably got close to half of them done yesterday, and then we'll have another day of doing that tomorrow, and then we'll pick up the stragglers here and there and get everybody finished up. So everyone should look to see those budgets coming out in the newspaper probably here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll start sending them to the paper today, and then they have to have a 10-day lead before their budget meeting, and we're scheduling most of their budget meetings in the first week of August, if not the second. So
Well, we'll move on to commissioners' comments and board reports. I need to jump in front of the line on this one because we have a party here that's been waiting patiently. This week I was contacted by Daryl Kleitz of Buckview Distillery. The distillery, Buckview Distillery's, of course, been a successful business up in north side of Ottawa, and by all accounts a good member of the business community. But they need to move locations. They've looked at a lot of communities, they looked all around, but it's important to Daryl. He believes in this community, and it'd be most convenient, too, for him to stay in this community, and I think we would love to accommodate him on that. An issue he's run into as he looks at a site in rural Franklin County is the same that he's ran into when he looked at his site initially in Ottawa, is that a distillery really isn't something that's defined in our zoning, or pretty much anybody's zoning. And what he would need to do to proceed with a location in Franklin County is to have us consider adding distillery as a defined use somewhere in our zoning regulations. Now, that process, of course, would start at the Planning Commission, but first he would have to ask to be put on the agenda, which would then the next meeting, which is a month later, if they saw fit, before they could even consider adding not his business, nothing to do with his business, but adding that definition. And then once the definition's on there, then he can make application. So it would really string out the process. There's another way, though, that an item can be added to the zoning board's agenda, which is if we see fit to have them, ask them to consider it. So Mr. Kleitz is here today, and I'm sure he'll tell you about his business and formally ask maybe that we consider doing that. But I think it's important before we start this conversation, everybody understand we're not considering right now the distillery, Daryl's business. We're considering simply whether there's any wisdom to adding the definition of distillery, and anybody can make an application as what would most likely be a special use permitted use in a commercial district would probably be where it would land. And so we're simply seeing if there's any wisdom in discussing adding distillery as a defined use in our codes, is what's being asked today, not
Ottawa does the city of Ottawa have?
initially, no, but they had to do the same thing and add distillery somewhere.
Is not, like, not lost, don't they make their own?
That's a brewery, but
Brewery is.
they may have very well had to go through the same process too, but, yeah. Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, in 2016, we went to the city of Ottawa and approached them. They went through this same
Okay.
situation where they had to add the zoning for a distillery to be in the city of Ottawa. There's two pieces really to this business. One is a federal alcohol production plant, which is considered a micro distillery in Kansas. That is zoned for being out in the industrial areas, okay? The second piece of this business would be considered a tasting room or a drinking establishment / restaurant. They're two separate types of zoning classes. So what happens at our distillery here in Ottawa is you can come down and visit us. We have a tasting room where you can come in, you can sample our products, you can buy those products right there in that room. Although it's in the same building, they're classed as two separate businesses. So the distillery is where we actually make the alcohol, produce all the products. The tasting room is where we would sell those products to the public. There's also a third piece to that, which is distribution. In Kansas, there's a 3-tier model, so we have a distributor. We're distributed throughout liquor stores in Kansas. So yeah, that's why I'm here today, is to ask your guys' support. We've been looking at moving. It's quite challenging, obviously, being out in an industrial zone and really being a destination business where, you know, most of our customers are coming from Kansas City, Wichita, Topeka, all over the state. And the challenge behind that is being able to marry those two in the same facility. So we've looked at Lawrence, obviously a great place for us to land, but this is my home county. I want to stay here. Most of you probably know us because of the hand sanitizer. We've done a lot of that. I'm ready for that to be over with, obviously.
So are we.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of why I ask you guys to support. We found a location out on Tennessee and I-35 that would be a great fit for us.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just a great location for us. We've worked with Larry, obviously, to kind of understand the nuances of how to make this move happen for us. And that's what Colton just kind of outlined for you, is speeding up that process so we can get our business put out there in a great place.
For anybody else, even at this point, it would just simply open up the avenue for
Yeah,
anybody who wanted to.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way the breweries and the wineries, and so when I went to the city and they adopted the zoning in Ottawa, that allowed everything to occur in the city as far as that type of.
So we're not springing this on you, Larry. You're right in the middle of this, right, already? Awesome. That's good.
Yeah, he's been helping me a lot, try to figure this all out. Okay?
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Larry, did I miss anything? Did I generally recap where this conversation's at?
Covered it pretty well, Mr. Chairman. The statutes require that there are only two ways that we can amend our zoning regulations, initiate amendments. And one of those is through the Planning Commission. They can initiate an amendment, or the county commissioners. I suggested that maybe it'd be better to come to you because of the timing. In order to get this before the Planning Commission, we're going to be delayed a couple of months, and that's why I thought it would be preferable to bring that matter this morning to you so that you could give us direction to present to the Planning Commission and advertise an amendment to the county zoning regulations to include provisions for distilleries. The site that's in question is a C2 zone. It's a highway commercial zone, and I think that that's still an appropriate place, but it could either be a use that's permitted by right or a use that's permitted by a special use permit. And I think that's a decision that the Planning Commission can weigh, but the matter is that we would advertise this, that there were going to be a public hearing to consider an amendment to the C2 zoning district to include provisions for distilleries. And The other half of his business is permitted in that district today. The problem was that the heart of that business, which is the distillery, isn't even addressed in our zoning regulations currently. So I didn't have a tool to help him get his application filed, but to go to the planning commission. So that's the whole purpose of our consideration here today, is just to give direction to staff to forward a recommendation to the planning commission to advertise the public hearing to amend the zoning regulations to include provisions for the distillery.
And to be very clear, I support this. I think that one of the things that Larry does incredibly well, and one of the things that's going to be required of any planning director that works for me, is that we work with landowners and businesses on how they can accomplish their goals. I mean, certainly we do have a responsibility, and you as the board are elected officials, we have to ensure that we are in compliance with our greater comprehensive plan, but this is exactly the type of individual. He's helped us with hand sanitizer. He's went about it entirely the right way. He's reached out to Larry. He's reached out to county commissioner. I mean, this is exactly the type of thing that's very rewarding about this position. And so certainly I wholeheartedly encourage and recommend the board to give Larry this guidance so that we can get this process started and get him down where he would like to be here as soon as we can. So,
Last thing any of us should want to see is a good business leave our county.
exactly right.
And I've said before, and we're lucky that right now the person in question, the business in question is very reputable, and we'd love to keep him around. But the discussion right now isn't the business per se, it is whether or not the county has a need to define distillery as a possible use in our zoning.
Exactly.
And I would say the fact that the use exists and that there's interest in that use in our county for future, it means it needs to be defined, it needs to be, rules need to be set up.
Yeah, and to the extent, if they're, like, I can appreciate that at some point in the future, we may be dealing with someone who isn't as reputable, and that is where you get to, do we want to allow this by right or by special use permit? And you will have the opportunity to weigh in on that. I mean, Larry's going to ask the planning commission that question, but that will ultimately come to you. And if it's your belief that this be a use that can be allowed via special use permit, well, then right there you have your mechanism to ensure that there is some amount of control. That way, if in the future we're dealing with someone perhaps more difficult than this gentleman, then we'll have that mechanism available.
Whether or not the site is an appropriate.
That's exactly right.
More likely, so. You need a motion to consider
Yes.
initiating an amendment?
I think that would be appropriate.
Okay.
If you recall, about this time last year, I came to you with a similar request, but this dealt with the wind and solar energy amendments to our codes because we didn't have provisions for those. So I come to you, and you directed me to advertise this for the planning commission to initiate, and we did. So it's nothing new. We've done this a number of times throughout the years.
Simply be making a decision to begin the conversation, and everybody would have a chance to give input. There'd be plenty of public comment. Can you help me, I think you understand maybe what we're discussing. Well, I know you understand what we're discussing. Will you help me put together a motion? What an affirmative motion would look like as far as
got it.
we would be asking the planning, go ahead.
Yeah, an affirmative motion in support of this item would read as follows. I make a motion to direct the Planning Commission to begin the discussion regarding amending the zoning regulations to add distilleries as a potential use either by right or special use permit within our zoning code.
Appreciate that. I didn't want to miss anything. So,
I'd like to make the motion to move forward. I know I served on the planning board, and this is not a new thing. We've run into several things over the years, business offices and different things, like we did up on the hill, and some other things that's turned, so we're not trying to run something new by anybody. This is just something we've done for years. When we've had something come up that's been odd or different and we didn't have anything, we just wasn't prepared for it. So I'd make a motion, we direct Larry to have the planning board move forward to investigate and see about doing it.
All right.
I kind of like the idea of the special use permit because it gives us a little bit more hands-on as far as being able to, but definitely, this is a good move. This would be awesome to have right there on, it'd be perfect.
All right, I still need a second for the, all right.
Commissioner Stottlemyre?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Dickinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn?
Yeah.
Chair Waymeyer?
Yes.
And to be clear, and you've said this, Colt, but this is going to come back in front of you on at least 2 occasions. One, you will be asked to approve the actual amendment to the zoning regulations, and then once that is done, this gentleman will make application presumably, and then that will also be back in front of you, and at that point, you can discuss the merits of his particular business at this particular location.
If this is an item you're very much so in support of, or very much so for some reason have reservations, we can all agree that having rules regarding this use is necessary, so. All right. Also attended the FCDC meeting, and Paul did a great job of recapping that, saved me some time, I appreciate it. So, Dawn, you have commissioner comments or board reports?
I have very little. I'll be going to Wellsville tonight. Did go to Rantoul Monday night. Let Janet know, they do have a new temporary clerk right now. So, and they'll, at their next meeting, they will be, but they have made a temporary clerk. I can't think of Laura's last name right now, but she's on the board.
That's what I had
Yeah,
heard.
yeah. So she is the temporary clerk, voted till the appointment next month. And they discussed a grant that they are, for their water lines, new water lines, that they think they're moving along, getting qualified on that. That's all I have at this time.
All right. Rick?
I attended Williamsburg City Council meeting Monday night. It was very short. One thing I will say that was encouraging, there was probably 10 to 12 people attended, plus the council and their clerk. Everyone there did have a mask on, which was encouraging. They talked about setting the date for their budget hearing, and on the other side of everybody wearing the masks, they approved an individual put on a street dance in Williamsburg on the end of this month. I'm not sure that was as encouraging as the mask. But anyway, hopefully, I know I've heard a lot of comments yesterday after the word started getting out about that happening, and hopefully they talk to their council members, discuss whether this is really appropriate time to do that in Williamsburg. And that was it.
All right. Diane?
I didn't attend any meetings. I did listen to a couple of the City of Ottawa meetings, and they're starting to work on their budget. I think they're like everybody else. Everybody's kind of keeping it pretty flat because we really don't know what COVID is going to look like in the coming months. So not raising a lot of budget items, but everybody's looking to that. That's it.
Dawn? Or Roy?
Thank you. Anyway, what I'm going to ask the commission to do is have a study session this coming Monday. I've got several complaints about the rifle range out on West 68. It's out there about 2 miles. This range was set up, approved, and following all the recommendations of the planning commission and everything like that. I've had complaints from the people north of that range of all the firing at that range and how it's been a nuisance to them when they're firing their rifles. And They want to have a review of the permit and voice their opinions. That none of them came to our meeting when we approved this rifle range. But since then, they've been using high-powered rifles. That's what it was designed for. It's out there, the farthest target's almost 3/4 of a mile distance. The nearest house north of there is over a mile distance. It's north of the Maridazine River, north of the rail trail, north of the railroad tracks. There's several people out there have complained to me about the rifle shooting out there. It sounds like they're shooting right at them. And they asked me to forward those complaints to, or they asked me to look into their permit and their special use permit to have this range. And anyway, Monday, I'm asking all the commissioners to have the study session. Both parties, the range manager plans to be here, and the citizens that are having a problem with the rifle range want to voice their opinions about the rifle range. And that's what I'm asking the rest of the commissioners to have this on our study session for next Monday. I didn't know if Derek had other things on the study session or not, but
I don't currently, but this is something that Roy has been discussing with me for a couple of weeks. I've discussed it, well, I discussed it prior to this morning with Larry, so he sent me the permit. I asked him this morning to pull the file and brief himself on it. So to be clear, I will ask Larry to review the specific permit and over the next few days do what he can to ascertain whether or not the holder of the permit is complying with its terms. And then we will have that discussion here on Monday. So certainly been working with Roy. We're ready to do it. If that permit is being complied with, and just in very brief discussions with Larry, I don't have any reason to believe that it's not. But if it's being complied with, then I'm not really sure what recourse there would potentially be, but that is a bridge we can cross after Monday's study session. But we'll be ready to go on it, and certainly, my hope would be if there's something that the range manager could do to help placate just cooperate with them and shouldn't have to involve us at all, but we'll see how Monday goes and we'll see what the specific complaints are.
Of course, there's no voting.
I remember when we did this, it seemed like we set some times. I mean, the shooting wouldn't be any
I'm sure we did.
later than a certain time in the afternoon, and in the morning, they wouldn't start shooting, so. That's the only two things I really remember a lot about there.
When was that approved?
It hasn't been that long ago. I was here when it happened, and there was not, Lord knows, we've had special use permits that have packed this room, and I don't recall there being anyone here on that one, so.
yeah, nobody was here when we passed it, and what I'm looking for is a compromise between the parties.
Of course, Monday, there's a study session, so there's no voting, so no decisions will be made. It'll be entirely a informational meeting. Of course, we'll hear from the public, staff, and get a history behind this item and be able to see the special use permit. I expect all that would be in front of us, as well as the applicant, so, our permit holder now. They're not an applicant, but anyways, so we will be having a study session Monday, so. Anything else before we look to adjourn?
I didn't think about it when Rick mentioned at the Rantoul meeting, they were using the masks that were handed out by the county, and everybody was in distancing masks, and so they are being used.
Good. All right. Was there a motion to adjourn?
Make motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.
You guys approved that special use permit in April of 2019, April 10th, 2019,
A little over a year.
so a little over a year. It looks